Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. For the first time ever, I am having a guest on for the second time. I have Ken Radner with me. Once again, you can call him Grace Radner if you'd like to. He's hopefully just as excited as I am to talk about two films, The Lost Boys and Lost Boys, The Tribe. Um, Thanks so much for being on. How are we doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks you for having me again.
Of
This
course.
really is quite an honor. I'm really glad to be back, and especially about, well, a movie. I'm not necessarily going to say both. A movie that
Yeah.
meant quite a bit to me in my younger years. And I could very well say the same thing to you of you making me watch a movie I definitely was avoiding for
Yeah.
quite a long
And I mean, you kind of forced me to watch The Lost Boys, and I did enjoy it way more than I expected to. I'm going to apologize to you for forcing you to watch the sequel because
time.
I cannot say the same thing about that film. I watched that this morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning before kids started coming into school, and it was not a good start to the day.
No,
Uh,
no, definitely not.
So we'll start with the original because we definitely need to spend a little bit more time on that than we do on the sequel because honestly, that doesn't really deserve too much recognition of any kind. But so we have The Lost Boys, 1987, Joel Schumacher. Um, and I didn't really know what to expect going in. I kind of sort of expected maybe a teen drama type thing. Just having seen the cover and you see seeing Kiefer Sutherland with the bleach blonde spikes. I have the thing right here. I'm looking at it right now,
Mhm.
and so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I kind of had an idea what it was about, but kind of try to go in with no expectations whatsoever, and I got kind of what you would expect from Joel Schumacher. You see bits and pieces of like that extreme Batman side of him, and then you also get the teen drama, young adult drama that you get with like St. Elmo's Fire, and it was a pretty good blend of both. So what do you have to say? How would you introduce the Lost Boys to someone who's never seen it?
Well, the first thing that I would say would be that this movie came to me at a very poignant and appropriate time in my life. So,
Mm,
1987, I was 16 in high school. I had discovered heavy metal music maybe about a year and a half before that.
okay.
So, I get into it. Then this movie comes out, and this is basically the heavy metal 80s take on the vampire movie.
Mm,
Well, and of course, being a similar age to some of the younger people in the movie, it definitely resonated with me.
mm,
We had, after that point, most of my friends and myself were walking around wearing, full length, trench coat, pea coats, and
yeah.
sunglasses all day long, buttons on them and everything. I even had one friend who, anytime we went to someone's house, would not come in, and he would stand there at the front door and say, "Well, you're the owner of the house, and I'm not coming in until I'm invited."
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was like, all right, you're taking it a little bit too far. I mean, I know we like the aesthetic, but you could kind of,
Right.
so basically, if I was going to just try and break it down very quickly for someone who wanted to watch it, I would basically explain to it that it's a vampire movie, teenagers, high school, heavy metal, and it's actually there's different parts to it, and I don't just mean that in Act One, Act Two, Act Three.
Mm,
There's different elements of it that some are quite good,
mm,
and then there's some stuff that's a little bit silly,
yeah.
which gets exacerbated in the second movie.
Yeah.
But I would say, just out of the vampire movies of the time, if you're looking for something that's a little more contemporary, and especially if you're anyway into that type of music and that style, that it's
Mm,
something you should at least give a watch, because it is going to give you everything that you want in that sense.
mm.
Just have to look past some of the sillier points in it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's this stigma that like campy horror movies always have bad acting, and Corey Feldman is a good example of that in
That's
both.
what I was talking about.
Yeah, but like Corey, am I saying his last name correctly? Corey Haim. He
Haim.
Haim.
Yeah.
He's somebody I know the name, but very unfamiliar with. Um, Having not seen a lot of those '80s films and '90s films when he was growing up, I thought he was I thought he did a pretty good job, honestly. I was impressed with he's obviously very young and he has that high pitched voice and he's sort of relatable in that way. But I think overall he does a very good job considering they do this great juxtaposition of comedy and drama throughout the entire thing, and they do a very good job of that. He does a really good job of carrying that. And then the older brother, last name is Patrick, I believe.
Jason Patrick,
Jason
who's
Patrick.
actually a
Yeah.
very accomplished actor, and it definitely
Yeah,
comes through in the movie. You can see he knows
absolutely.
what he's doing.
Yeah, I said that in my review. Of course, I wrote a review. It's the first time that I'd seen the film, so I had to write a review for it. And that's one of the things that stood out to me. I thought he did such a good job. And then, of course, Kiefer Sutherland is such a good actor, and he does such a great job. He plays a really cheesy part, but he does a really good job of making it dramatic and making it a little bit terrifying for younger audiences and even for older audiences to understand and appreciate. So, what are you doing there? um, so I was really impressed with the acting overall. Like I said, I looked at Steph and I said, "Is Corey Feldman always this bad of an actor?" And she goes, "No, just in this movie." And now, I mean, I don't have a lot of frame of reference for him, but I'm judging her a little bit for that. So, you want care to fill me in on that at all?
All right. So the first thing is there was this, actor phenomenon at the time during the 80s that was
Mm,
called the two Coreys.
yeah.
So Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, and because they were the same age and they started acting around the same time and they became
Mm,
friends rather quickly, they tended to try to do things together. And, just like I said, because they had the same name, it was very easy to make a group out
mm,
of. Corey Feldman was actually in his earlier days was quite a good actor. The first movie I did speak to you briefly about this earlier.
mm,
Um, he was in this movie called Stand By Me
yeah.
that was a few years before that had an amazing cast. I mean, it had was it River Phoenix?
Mm,
It had Will Wheaton, and I think Kiefer Sutherland was in that one as well.
okay.
And it was extremely dramatic movie written by Stephen King.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, and it's unusual because it wasn't really a horror movie. It was
Yeah.
more of a coming of age, kind of threatening movie of kids who are going. It's basically, I think, one of them is traveling out somewhere in the woods by some train tracks and he finds a dead body.
Okay.
And so he goes back to his friends and says, hey guys, you want to go see a dead body?
Okay.
And they have to do a whole trek to go and find, this body. And on the way, they encounter these high school ruffians. I think the group of kids are supposed to be kind of like junior high.
Okay.
And then they got these high school guys or high school dropouts who, riding motorbikes and wearing leather jackets. It's
Yeah.
supposed to take place in the 50s.
Okay.
So in this one, Corey Feldman was actually very good because it was a lot of character building
Mm,
and it had a lot of that, like a similar, like you said about, Breakfast Club and things like that, that
mm,
they had that coming of age story where they get to know more about each other and
yeah.
there's character development. So he did do a good job with that. And I'm not sure of the exact track of his career after that, but then the next thing I know about him, he's in Lost Boys.
Mm,
And during that whole time, apparently had some kind of friendship with Michael Jackson.
okay.
And he would go to Neverland Ranch.
Mm,
He would hang out with Michael Jackson. He began doing performances and music videos where he would basically imitate Michael Jackson. He would dress the same way. He did his hair the same way. He would dance the same way. He still kind
Okay.
of does it a little bit,
Yeah.
even up to today. So they had some kind of influential relationship on each other.
Okay.
So the next thing I see, he's in Lost Boys and he's doing one of the worst Rambo impressions you ever could possibly do. I
Yes.
mean, it was just horrible. And,
Yes.
and I'm thinking when I'm watching this, when he did that, when he came on set and started doing that,
Yeah.
was the director or his agent or someone, were they saying to him or not saying to him, don't do that? That's not, or did they think that was like a good thing because he was supposed to kind of be, a silly character? And
Yeah.
both of the Frog brothers were.
Mm,
So that's the point. It's such a contrast between how everybody else was taking it really, really seriously.
yeah.
And it seemed the two of them were just, you know, doing some, crazy, off the wall kind of stuff. And then after that, all the stuff that Corey Feldman did was just silly and bad acting. So I
Yeah.
don't know what happened to him. I don't know if it's that he was such good friends with Corey Haim. Corey Haim died
Mm,
around that time, or a few years after.
yeah.
So I don't know if that affected him to a certain way, that he kind of,
Right.
sort of went off the edge a little bit and his acting really got affected by it. But
Yeah.
it really, it just goes back to what I was saying before. His earlier days were his best, and he just seemed to kind of degrade from there.
Yeah. That's such a shame. It seems like he is like the epitome of the child star, where his whole life just went awry and he just kind of lost his way, and it sucks. And I mean, I read up a little bit on him today, but you can only read, you can only figure out so much by reading stuff online. To be able to see him develop over time is significantly different than just reading about it. So, uh, and then to your point about his horrible Rambo impression, I am wondering a little bit if, because like you said, everyone takes it very seriously, and I I think viewers probably look at the Frog Brothers as the comic relief, but by the end of the film, you realize that they're the most sane people there. I mean, with I mean, the grandfather realizes what's happening. He's kind of a dick because he doesn't say anything for the entire movie.
Yeah,
He's just like, yeah, whatever. It's Santa Carla, or yeah, Santa Carla is whatever. It's here. It's fine, whatever. And then at the end, he goes, oh, except for the vampires. You couldn't have told us that an hour and a half ago and
yeah,
saved some
yeah,
lives in the process.
yeah,
But
exactly.
I think they do a really good job, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, with the frogs, of creating a juxtaposition of drama and comedy, because they very much are the comic relief. You laugh at the acting, you laugh at the characters in general, and then again you realize by the end they're the only ones that really know what they're talking about and actually have some common sense. So they have a little bit of character development, and I like that. And so maybe in retrospect, Feldman didn't do a terrible job. Again, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, but it worked for me thinking about it that way.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I never really thought about it that way. You do understand, obviously, at the end, it was hard for me to tell if it was the idea that, they had the comic book store,
Hmm.
and that there's that, apparently there was a legend around, the grandfather knew there were vampires there the whole time. When they first go into the town, the back of the sign of the billboard introducing you to the town says the murder capital of the world.
Right.
So people know that something's going on there.
Hmm.
And so I always wondered, did they actually know that there were vampires there, or that they were just so taken with all the comic books and they knew all the
Hmm.
lore about vampires because they
Okay.
figured someday we might have to encounter them, because
Yeah.
everybody in the entire city is saying there's vampires everywhere.
Yeah.
And just the history of what happened there. So it is interesting with the idea that they did indeed know. They
Hmm.
could have possibly done it before,
Yeah.
but there's certain things about the way they try to go about it that shows that this was probably one of their first times, if not the first time, actually fighting vampires.
Yes.
And it speaks more to the stuff. I think the example that's most clear about it is when they have the one vampire in the bathroom. They filled a bathtub with garlic and holy water,
Yeah.
and they pull the screen aside, and he laughs at them, and he's like, "Garlic doesn't work, boys."
Yeah.
So they obviously, there's some things that they do not know,
Yeah.
which you would think if they have actually done this before, they would have known that.
Correct.
So, but in ultimately, they are quite effective,
Yeah.
and it's just tough to tell. Like the way they played is just because they're so goddamn nuts,
Yeah.
and and their parents. I mean, they're running the comic store, and their parents are just two hippies asleep in the corner the whole time. So they've obviously been left to their own devices quite a bit.
Yes.
So it's always been tough to tell, but putting it that way, that they really were the only people. It's kind of like in the movie when you have the crazy guy running around saying, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do this, and then in
Yeah.
the end, they were indeed trying to do that. So
Exactly.
it did have a little bit of that element to it, certainly.
Yeah, and I wonder if they intentionally painted them in this light. I mean, they're obviously named after Edgar Allan Poe, and
Yeah,
I'm wondering if, because Poe has a history of being a bit psychotic with all of his macabre stories and such, and I'm wondering if they paint them this way or they write them this way to be sort of a reflection of that, like another nod to him, not just to his name but to his character as well. So there's all the they actually end up, now talking about them, end up being the most intriguing characters in the entire film. Now that I'm sitting here and actually talking about them, which is very interesting. Um, but it as a whole, it plays out like a very good horror movie. It has a very cohesive story. You find some horror movies, they tend to shift in tone and they shift the narrative ever so slightly and they bring in these secondary and tertiary stories and they don't always mesh very well. And I felt like they do a very good job of creating a very linear story, staying on that path, and it all working very well from beginning to end. And that's a tough thing to do in any genre, but the ones that I found it to be the most difficult in is the horror genre.
that is definitely true. And what I really appreciate about how they do it is they don't it's a tough thing to say, and I'm probably not even going to say it exactly correctly, but they don't really go over the top with it too much, which,
Right,
it's a hard thing to say about a vampire movie, that you're not
right,
going over the top, but they seem to create a specific canon or a specific lore, and they stick to it. They
yeah,
don't really, they don't veer from it. Whatever the rules are that they establish in that movie, they follow them, and they
yes,
go by that, because a lot of times, almost every time, with these horror movies, especially horror movies of that period,
yeah,
they would just contradict themselves left and right.
yeah,
So it's good that they tried to stay consistent. And I think that helps out the movie a lot, because you knew who the characters were.
yeah,
You knew what they were going to do. They did have their changes here and there, but you knew they weren't just going to start doing something that made absolutely no sense for that character to do.
absolutely.
Yeah, they seem to stick to it very well. And again, story, definite, I guess easy to follow continuity and plot. You know what you're
Mm,
getting. Someone's going to be, there's going to be vampires. People will be getting, going to be getting eaten.
yeah,
Someone's going to get turned.
yes,
I appreciated that they actually did, they did the twist toward the end
mm,
about, who was the actual head vampire.
yes,
And that was actually surprising. I mean, well, and again, for that time, I was about
mm,
16 when I watched it, so I
yeah,
didn't have an incredible amount of insight.
yeah,
But when I first saw it, I was like, "Wow, that's pretty, cool that they did that." That's
yes,
and I love the grandfather character. He was
yeah,
always really fun, and all the vampires did an excellent job. Kiefer Sutherland
mm,
was great.
yeah,
Um, I love how, and I forgot this last time we were talking, but I forgot how Alex Winter is in it.
yeah,
And he actually billed as Alexander Winter. So he wasn't
okay,
yet Alex Winter. He was,
interesting.
and it was looking to me, all those guys that were vampires,
Mm,
they were all trying to be like these pretty boys,
Yeah.
and Alex Winter at that time, you're looking at him and you're like, wow, he has like this angelic look and like
Yeah.
chiseled abs, and you're like, this is Alex Winter. This is like, this is Ted. This is Bill, and then later, when he really didn't do much more with that, I was thinking this guy, when he was maybe in his teens or like 20, was set to be a star.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that none of the vampire crew, except for Keith Sutherland, really went anywhere. Maybe except for Ed Herman.
Okay. Yeah.
But he did a lot of stuff earlier.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting. And then you have almost everybody in the family that moved to Santa Clara. Everybody in their group were either very accomplished actors by that time. So Diane Wiest had done tons of things.
Yeah.
And then, and Corey Haim was looking to be a big star until, obviously what happened to him happened.
Right.
And then Jason Patric became, did some of the greatest movies of the time a few years later.
Okay.
So they really, it was interesting to see how that went. And I don't know if the producers or the directors knew anything about any future projects they had planned for them.
Right.
But it just seemed like you had a bunch of people in there that later on did prove themselves to indeed know what they were doing. I think you could see the beginning of it here, that they were able to get a character, hold on to it, embody that character, and then present them the way, that they would behave in a consistent manner.
Right. And to that point, they do that so poorly in the sequel. Everything about it doesn't make sense. Like you said, they stick to this lore that's very clear what lore they're sticking to. They don't veer from that in the original. And here we are in the sequel. And very early on, they go, oh, well, this one could turn to stone, and this one might explode, and this one might implode. Well, what are we doing here? Why are there all these different possibilities? And now you can kill them using the antlers from a deer, or there's all these different things that you can now do to kill a vampire, and how they eventually die can be completely different from the person that's standing next to them. And I hated that about it. And you're absolutely right. Veering from that and not having a very specific way of dealing with this really throws the movie off. That's one of many things that throws the movie off, but that's one thing that stood out to me. And then back to your point about the plot, with Max. So I think they make it so obvious at one point, and then they so quickly debunk that you don't expect that twist again at the end. I think when he walks up to the house and he says, well, you're the man of the house, I'm not coming in until this. And then I think everybody goes, obviously he's a vampire. It makes so much sense. And then they immediately debunk it at the dinner table. And I think everybody just kind of dismisses that. And he is not a prominent character in it for 20 or 30 minutes. And then the twist comes. Again, so well laid out, so well executed. And Ed Herman is very good. I know him from Gilmore Girls because of Seth, but that's not a movie. That's not a show that I'm a fan of. So I was happy to see him in something that I enjoyed. But yeah, so I mean, I can't really think of a bad thing to say about the film. It's obviously a campy 80s movie with so much value.
Well, that is definitely true. The one thing, I mean, I'm not really going to say that it was a bad thing about the film, because it actually became a good piece of 80s lore, was big, oily, muscly, sexy saxophone guy.
Yeah.
So when they're having that party on the beach, and and he's playing that. So this guy was apparently, a little bit before this time, he was doing that and playing some music. He got this role, And then after that, he traveled with Tina Turner
Oh
and
wow.
played saxophone for her. And he was known for playing on stage wearing a G string.
Oh my.
And yeah, it was just wild.
Yeah.
And every time like in shows during that time in the 80s, they wanted to have somebody playing a saxophone. There was some guy being sexy saxophone guy.
Yeah.
So, and they did Saturday Night Live sketches about it. And there was even a guy in California who he does a performance like birthday parties, like a
Hmm.
performance act. And
Okay.
he's basically, you hire him and he's 80s sexy saxophone guy.
Oh my God.
And yeah, he just goes around to people, plays saxophone on them and grinds on them and everything. And that's like this guy's whole career. So, so that was probably the one thing when you look at it that you're like, what is this? What am I looking
And
at right now?
there is a nod to that at the beginning of the sequel. There
Yes, the fat guy.
he is not sexy saxophone guy. He is
Right.
other saxophone guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I guess there's no smooth way to transition into the sequel. But I think we have to talk about it, even though we don't want to.
Yes.
Um, my favorite thing about the movie is the fact that they include Corey Feldman. I don't love the character because he's far more extreme in this than he was in the first one. And I get that, I guess over the past 20 years, he's become far more jaded and aggressive. Um, but I like it because you often get these sequels that are labeled sequels, but are they really? You just slap the same title on them and give them a subtitle, and now all of a sudden they're part of that series. So the fact that they actually have a character, well, two characters really, because there is a mid credit scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they throw characters in there that have existed previously in the series, and I think if anything's going to save it, it's going to be that because it is in fact a direct sequel to the Lost Boys. Uh, Other than that, I don't know. Did you find anything that you enjoyed about this film?
All right. Well, the one thing I'm going to say, because you did mention it before, that now this one can be killed by antlers, and
Yeah,
so actually in the first Lost Boys movie, that's how Kiefer Sutherland got it,
yeah. Okay, okay.
was the antlers. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, all right, you're repeating the same beats. But then turning to stone and exploding, I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
I'm trying to think if I could think of anything good about it, and I'm having a tough time because every time they look like they're going to do something that might be worthwhile,
Mhm.
they just trash it.
Yeah,
So showing how Edgar Frog is now, like you said, he's more advanced in what he's doing.
mhm.
He knows more techniques. He's more capable.
Yeah,
He's not. He doesn't even ask about it. He tells him even at one point, "I'm going to be sending you a bill." Like this is
yeah.
something he's been doing a lot.
Yes.
So I guess in that sense, developing the character was okay,
Mhm.
but he was just still, I mean, and even doing an even worse Rambo impression this time.
Yes.
And now instead of just the red sweatband, well, now he's got a black one.
Yeah.
But he's got all these cool tattoos crawling up his neck, and and I was like, wow, what's going on? And it was so. Just so you know, you sitting through that movie in one sitting, I have to commend you. It took me 3 times. I
Oh my
started it,
God.
and then I was just like, this isn't. I watched it about the first third or so of the way through, and then about the
Mhm.
second third with my wife.
Okay.
And then I just finished it up on my own because I don't want to get arrested for spousal abuse. And she was telling me, it's like when we got to 2/3 of the way through, and then I'm like, forget this, turn this off, we're going to sleep, I can't. And we start talking the next day, and she goes, Do you realize all you were doing was sitting there the entire time going, this is so horrible. This is so horrible. She's like, that's
Yeah,
all you would say. I was asking you stuff, and you're just like, this is so horrible. I was like, I can't even turn it off. It was, I mean, the methods of killing the vampires,
hmm
I I enjoy because I think it was one of the worst things they did. How now you can, well, you have to stab him in the heart with a stake. And the main character's like, yeah, a wooden stake. And he goes, no, well, metal will work too. And any sharp object will work.
yeah,
Or a blunt object. You just have to get him through the heart. And then I'm like, and then the first thing comes to my mind is, so you can shoot them.
yeah,
Just shoot them. Just take a gun. And I'm like, that's the part about vampires that you cannot kill them with just such
right.
mundane things. There's a
Yes,
very specific way of doing it. That what else? That he can make regular water holy water because he was ordained online as a minister. Okay. I've ordained myself online as a minister. So I guess I'm cool to I guess I'm
you're
cool
good
to
to
fight
go.
vampires.
Yes, you're
Yeah,
good to
yeah.
go.
I'm good to go. But then he shoots holy water in little balloons out of a shotgun. How's that supposed to work at all? It's just they just and now he goes from owning a comic book store to being a surfboard shaper.
Yes,
Yeah, because that totally makes sense.
right. It's a natural progression. You go from owning a comic book store to shaping surfboards, obviously.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was so hard. I mean, the main character's hair changes lengths during the movie. It was just, well, I want you to, I could go all day talking about all the bad stuff I saw. I
yeah,
want some of your takes on that stuff because I'll say them all. So
yeah.
I just wanted to see what you thought.
Okay, so the first cringy thing that I got out of it was they're standing on the beach, and there's a quick twist, obviously in the beginning, where one guy's a vampire, and then you realize, oh shit, everybody's a vampire, and then they like very aggressively like assault him. They brutally assault this man, and then cut his head off. And I say in my review of this one that the director, I think PJ Pesce was his name, he must have just been a fan of the original and mustered up some cash and said, I'm just going to make my own version and I'm going to make it even cooler and more extreme. And he just didn't care the feedback he got. He was just going to do whatever the hell he decided he was going to do. And that's what he did. And then I laughed hysterically when the main character gets out of the car because I only know him from one other movie, and that's from American Pie Band Camp. He
Oh
plays
my God. I did not
he
even know that. I didn't think about
he
that.
plays Stifler's cousin. So he, for the entire movie, is just a Stifler trying to fight vampires.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
I I couldn't I could not separate the two characters. They were just one, and it ruined the movie effectively. One of the many reasons the movie was ruined. Um, I kind of enjoy that Kiefer Sutherland's half brother is the main vampire. That's a
Yeah.
nice little nod. I mean, can't get the real guy because he's gone. Apparently, there was actually talks prior to this one of creating a prequel where it was going to be Kiefer Sutherland's character, his journey into becoming a vampire and how he got to that point. So I much rather would have seen that than this sequel. Um, but there's nothing. Okay, no, I lied. There's one other thing that I like. I like the new mix on the song from the original. The original is great. It's very creepy. But this version's like a slightly more metal version, and they try to extend the track a little bit. And I did enjoy that. But besides that, I don't really know what else they could have done wrong. I We talk about that there being a very linear story in the first one, and one of the things that I hate about horror movies and comedies is when they introduce a romantic aspect to it that does nothing but ruin it. Like the romantic aspect in The first makes a lot of sense. I get it. It's not overbearing. Um, what is her name? Star in the first one.
Yeah, Star. I think it
Yeah.
was it Ione Sky who played her? I don't think that was
No.
it.
What was
No,
her
it wasn't
name?
her.
I remember her from a television show, but I cannot think of her name. I can see her face, and um, but that made sense. It went along with the story very well. It didn't interrupt anything. It was very frumpy, and it just seems like they couldn't stick to one story. They kept veering left and right, and they never really get themselves on track to begin with. And I hate the comedy. Like I hate when Edgar Frog walks away at the end and goes, "I'll send you a bill." I hate that.
Hmm.
I hate when the sister's about to eat this guy and she kind of snaps out of it and goes, "Do you know how upsetting it is that I was going to eat him? I'm a vegetarian."
Yeah, what are you doing?
No, no, you don't need that. It's another poor attempt. I don't know, to make it more campy and just do whatever you felt like. And I don't know, like you, I could go on forever just naming all these horrible aspects. And sometimes I feel bad. I don't feel bad about bashing this film. It doesn't need to exist. There is a third one, like you said, there is a third one, and I believe they bring the other Frog brother back for that.
Yeah, well, that follows after the second one.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were setting it up. Oh, by the way, the actress for Star was Jamie Gertz, so
Yes.
she did a bunch of '80s stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
what amazes me is, and I mean, I guess maybe at some point I should check out the third one. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. I
Yeah.
doubt I will.
Mm,
But just the idea that they would set up a third movie.
yeah.
So that showed a few things. Either the guys that were producing this were really optimistic about what they were doing,
Yeah.
or they were just so rich that they were like, I don't care. We
Yeah.
have about $100 million that we can throw away.
Yeah.
We're just going to make two Lost Boys movies.
Yeah.
And, and it's just, it was also stuff was just so out of time for the period
Yeah.
it was made. I mean, in the
Mm,
first one, everything really matched up well. Just the type of
yeah.
music, the type of things they did. I mean, they rode motorcycles, metal clothes, and everything. And then in this one, they're surfing, riding dirt bikes, and riding skateboards. And what was it, 2008?
Yes.
So you're talking about stuff they should have been doing like 10 years ago
Yeah.
at least. So everything was just out of place, and the pacing was off, like you said. And I think
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it was just basically the guy that made the movie was just, I love this movie, and I got a guy that's going to give me a ton of money to do it, or I myself have a ton of money to do it,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna do it. And by the way, I'm gonna throw in needless sexuality. I mean, at
Yes.
certain times, it can be appropriate in a movie, it can
Mm,
advance the story,
sure.
but this was just like he was just doing like, stupid early '80s slasher softcore porn.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
It,
totally pointless, uncomfortably pointless.
yes. I mean, you could have had the first sex scene in the shower, and that would have been an appropriate time for him to find out about her. But then to extend it to another location and have it happen again, just to like constantly tease nudity over and over again, just to show you bloody nudity at a later point, it served no purpose. It like just maybe to arouse, 1% of the audience. I don't know what it was, but watching it, it was just very cringy, very uncomfortable. And again, I can't understand the point. It just every decision he made, like why do we care that they were former professional surfers? Like, are you just justifying why they're surfers and why they're here? Like, why is that a big deal? It just I can't make sense of a lot of the decisions that he made. And the more I talk about it, unlike the Frog Brothers in the first one, the more I talk about this, the more frustrated I get.
I think when I look at how they did what they did, I remember that there was a bunch of movies back in the 80s that
Mm,
they tried to cater it to a specific kind of, clique or crowd. All
yeah.
right. So a lot of the horror movies, no, not a lot, but there was some very specific horror, action movies
Mm,
that tried to cater to either like a punk rock crowd or a heavy metal crowd.
yeah.
So you had, like Class of 1984 and Surf Nazis Must Die and
Yeah.
Toxic Avenger and they were all very, very campy, did sexuality for almost no reason,
Mm,
very violent, and had that amount of the culture in it.
yeah.
So, and back then, you knew the targets for these movies were like 13 to 17-year-old boys who were into
Yeah.
that type of music. That was the
Yeah.
whole thing because you could get this movie and they would rent it to you at the video store and you get to see boobies.
Right.
So, so I have a feeling that maybe there was some of that in this,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to think who is this movie for? So is this for the same thing? Is this for, like middle teen surfers who like horror? Like that's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. But it's also rated R. So
Yeah, so yeah, it's rough.
yeah,
You'd always be able to get your hands on an R-rated movie though at a
sure.
certain age.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't I'm trying to figure it out as to who did they make this movie for? Who did they
Yeah.
intend this movie for? And at what point were they editing this thing together that they said, yes, this is great. We're going to do
Yeah.
this and release it.
Yes.
So it's just it's confounding to me.
Yeah. If I were you, someone who was a fan from 1987 when the original came out, I would be offended by the sequel.
I
I,
was I was.
I would write a strongly worded letter or a strongly worded email to anyone that was involved in this. Um, and I'm almost tempted to do it for you because I I mean you applauded me for sitting through this in one sitting. I applaud you for being able to go back to it, knowing what you were getting back into, not once but twice. So kudos to you, man, being able to dive back in, and kudos to your wife for taking the plunge with you at least for a third of it.
Thank you. Hey,
Yeah,
we always in the course of trying to perform, I don't want to say work, but complete a task,
yeah,
we many times have to do things that we feel either uncomfortable or
hmm,
just unhappy with doing.
yeah,
So I sort of saw this as, well, I got to do my job.
yeah,
Like I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to hold my nose and I'm going to get through it.
yeah,
And then on the other end, we'll be able to make something great out of it, almost in the sense of like taking medicine. Tastes
yeah,
gross, and a lot of times you hate how it makes you feel, but on the end,
mm,
you're going to come out in a better situation. And I think at least we managed to snatch a little bit of victory out of the jaws of that defeat.
yes. We get to sit down and we get to talk about it for 45 minutes, which I genuinely enjoy. I'm so glad to have you back for a second time. We'll have to do a third time.
Thank you.
Um, of course, I sat down with John last night and we did one of these, and we shouted you out numerous times because prior to you, it was me sitting down and interviewing filmmakers, which I still do and I still love. But this was a new thing that I was doing, and that's thanks to you. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And John is very happy about it. He wants to do something similar on Bullshit Hour as well. So that's all thanks to you, man.
Thank you. You know something? That's extremely, extremely high praise. I truly appreciate you making me a part of it. I know I sort of weaseled my way in to the idea of doing it. I still kind of tell the story as in, I was just trying to ask, and then they're like, I think he wants to be involved in some way, and I'm like, oh my god, did I just do that?
And
So
so
you know, I I'm sorry if, like, that was any kind of discomfort, but I'm glad that
No, no.
you feel that it came out as a positive situation. I really love doing it. I can't wait till the next time. I always have fun doing this, and it's always just like I told you the last time after we cut the last time. I don't ever really need to write notes for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's just I watch something that I know quite a bit about, some things that I love, and I can
Mhm.
just talk about it.
Yes.
And the structure seems to flow very well. And I'm really so happy to be a part of it. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. And I was not uncomfortable with you weaseling your way in there. So sometimes I think I have trouble with social cues. So when John was like, I think Ken wants to be on the show, I was like, oh, I did not get that. I actually did not get that. I missed that completely. So that's on me. But no, I was not uncomfortable at all. I'm glad that that John jumped in and explained clearly because I don't get those things sometimes. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's the truth. Um, but again,
We all
Ken,
have those issues.
yeah. But again, thank you so much for being on. Please let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me on Facebook, Ken Radner, Ken space Radner at facebook.com. You can send me a personal message and let me know that you saw me on the show here. We could discuss movies or whatever you like. And I would just appreciate the contact. Thank you so much again for having me.
You're more than welcome. I will I will reach out soon with a couple more movies. We'll do this a third time and we'll chat about something else.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, man. You have a great night.
All right,
See ya.
take care.